This is particularly called designing our way towards cleaner air, designing our way towards a more sustainable pattern of land management and property development. And as an architect, I use the word design very consciously. You see here a small crew of architects working on a plan. It happens to be for Cornelius. But we are working in a lot of detail. The idea of designing rather than planning, we think about planning as the way of managing our towns and working out the conflicts between property rights and community values. Within planning, though, there is a level of abstraction which has become natural to both architects and planners, and in fact developers. We think in terms of abstractions contained within zoning ordinances and so forth. The idea of designing our communities has to do with thinking about them in detail, thinking about them as real places rather than as abstractions, and thinking about them as real places in terms of the landscape, the property ownership patterns, the desires, hopes, and ambitions of the people who own the land. Sometimes they're for conservation, often they're for development. The idea that basically our economy works on the principle of growth, and it works best when that growth is properly handled, that we don't grow in a way that diminishes our capital. That's not good economic sense, it's not good environmental sense. The fact that I'm a southern boy, this is the south of England. This actually is where America started in terms of the Anglo-Puritan settlement. This is the town of Dartmouth. This is the view from the balcony of the apartment that my wife and I live in for a month or two each summer. The Mayflower and the Speedwell set sail from here. The Speedwell sprang a leak, a wind blew up, and they went into this tiny little place called Plymouth, which was not on any map, for repairs. And so history records that the settlement began with the Mayflower, or not began, but certainly received this major impetus when the Mayflower sailed from Plymouth. And you have a Plymouth Rock, and who drives a Plymouth Voyager? Probably somebody here. You'd have a Dartmouth Rock, and you'd be driving a Dartmouth Voyager if the wind had been blowing in the different direction, and the Speedwell had, you know, and it was a leaky tub. I mean, the Speedwell, I mean, it was about that big, right? And it didn't get very far out of this harbor. This is Dartmouth. This is where I grew up. And it's a very dense community. It's a town of about 14,000. So by American standards, it's really pretty small. And you can see that there is a typical pattern of fairly compact settlement and then a lot of preserved landscape. That landscape has been undeveloped for my whole lifetime, and of course, many hundreds of years before that. But nobody thinks about building on that land for a couple of reasons. One, that land is working farmland, so it's an active piece of economic production, but also it's a function of the tourist economy. The tourist economy is far greater in terms of importance than agriculture and fishing, which are the traditional industries. All these, $250,000 yachts and up, they represent a massive injection of money into the local economy. That economy is based on natural beauty and the unspoiled environment. If you mess this up, the town will lose its economic value, its economy will tank, and all the problems that come with that. So it's in everybody's interests to maintain open space as an economic resource. Now, it so happens because Europeans, being who we are, we have a different planning system, and I won't bore you with the details. But essentially, that land, not only do people not want to build on it because of its inherent economic value to the community, it is also protected by the planning legislation. It is permanently preserved landscape. And it's taxed, therefore, as agricultural land, not as development land. With that kind of proviso, then you get a lot of innovative development of the pieces that you can build on. And one of the interesting things that I've never quite found an adequate explanation for is why the most powerful, the richest, the most innovative nation on the face of the earth, America, has such conservative development practices when poorer, more hidebound, reactionary nations in Europe have much more innovative development practices. This is a cultural conundrum. If anybody knows the answer, tell me afterwards, and I'll write it down so I don't forget it. But it's a very interesting cultural phenomenon. And the notion that with greater government involvement in planning and land regulation, that breeds greater private innovation and capital entrepreneurial actions is yet another, that's another dimension of this cultural contradiction. Because the notion of government being the answer to some of the issues that vex us is a point of view that would not necessarily find very many supporters. The challenge for us to make sure that not only in the pretty towns of my part of England, but in the wonderful communities all across America, the challenge we all face is to find a way of connecting the entrepreneurial talent that is so rich in our communities with a sense of working with our heritage, recognizing its multi-layered economic value as opposed to its immediate development value. Because asphalt is the last crop you will ever plant. That is a very, sort of cliche almost, but it's a very powerful way of saying it. These fields have been there, these hedgerows have been there for 1,200 years. This is the Saxon settlement pattern of a compact town and then the farmland, which was the economic factory which supported that town all the way through the Middle Ages. So the idea of thinking about the land as an economic resource which has many layers of possibility and inevitably needs relatively sophisticated management is one of the issues which is at the heart of my work and many others, both as a practitioner to try and engage and to mesh the public interest in the private development sector, and also as an educator, both to try and understand this set of circumstances and to teach its complexities to folks perhaps wiser than I, who will take this interesting conundrum to perhaps innovative solutions that I can only dream about.